really, really difficult. I taught out of my subject before, and it made me ill, and it made me want to consider leaving the profession. And it wasn't good for my pupils either.
So when you talk about workload, is it more about the nature of the work that you're having to do, rather than it being creative, educational, and fun, and directed towards the children whose names and hearts and minds you know? It's about how much of that data is strictly unnecessary in your view, because it matters. Data matters. When I was clearing out my mum's house, I found my old junior school reports, would you believe, and underneath it's like what percentile of the educational population you're reaching standards wise, and I won't give my full report up, but we've always collected data, haven't we, to make sure that standards are maintained.
Absolutely, and some of those things are really, really important. But the thing that you probably valued the most, treasured the most, going back looking over those things, were the little comments.
Of course, yeah.
The bits that proved that your teacher really knew you.
But some of that data will be necessary. So what I'm trying to get from you is how much of this extra workload is, in the view of teachers, unrelated and to education, to proper education, and unnecessary.
So some of it is completely unnecessary. Teachers being told what colour font they should use to put, what type of format their lesson plans should be in, being told to rewrite them so that Ofsted can see them in a particular way, because this sort of myth of Ofsted wanting to see particular things in a classroom has absolutely been driven by the government and by the inspectorate themselves. And you can absolutely understand why some leaders and some teachers spend time doing that, because they are scared that Ofsted will come in and label them and not only ruin their career but ruin the reputation of their school. Now, as a teacher, the thing that I found the most important was having time, individual time with the children and young people that I taught. If you've got increasing class sizes, and we have some of the largest class sizes in Europe, our primary school class size is the largest that they've been since 2000. That means that teachers are less able to spend one-to-one time building relationships with their children. You'll hear from parents, you'll know parents and grandparents and children themselves that talk about how many teachers they have had in a year, and that makes it really difficult for them to develop a relationship, particularly after the pandemic. And we know that those things are really important. We know that teachers are spending an awful lot of their time standing in for social care and social services because those support networks around communities and around schools have disappeared. Now, no teacher begrudges doing that, but it isn't the role of a teacher, and it puts additional pressure on the teacher and the support staff in the classroom.
And you mentioned the pandemic there. Amongst those who are criticising you for striking are those who say children suffered from the absence of school or the difficulties of getting the education in the way that they did. And this is the worst thing that could happen to them. More absences from school, more difficulties in classes being delivered. This is the worst of times to do this.
And that is why no member of the NEU has taken this decision lightly. They feel if they don't take this decision now, it will not get better. It absolutely has to get better from now. Education, the government gave education very little support during that pandemic. They gave them lots of diktats and lots of changing direction, but it was teachers, school leaders and support staff that went out delivering education packs to children and young people, that changed their practice overnight to be able to deliver online lessons, that provided mental health support and guidance not only for children but also for parents, that changed their parents' evenings to online so that we could engage in conversations with children and their families. Teachers absolutely recognise that this is a difficult time and a difficult decision to make. But if we don't make it now, if the government doesn't make a commitment to restore the lost pay that teachers have seen since 2010, we are fearful that fewer children will have a qualified teacher in front of them in the years to come.
Niamh, thank you. Niamh Sweeney, Deputy General Secretary at the National Education Union. Listening to that was Robin Walker, Conservative MP for Worcester and Chair of the Education Select Committee. Your thoughts on what you heard from Niamh Sweeney there? Good afternoon to you.
Well, I've got every sympathy for the fact that teachers worked extraordinarily hard during the pandemic, and but there are challenges with workload. And actually, it's one of the things that I engage with during my time as schools minister. I'm sure Gillian Keegan is happy to engage with as Education Secretary, is looking at how we can help in terms of workload, in terms of staff well-being, and in terms of support there. But I think it is worth bearing in mind that out of every part of the public sector, education is the one which has been most prioritised at the last spending review. And when the unions came to the government last year and said we need extra billions for the sector and we need £2 billion just in order to keep things going, that was heard loud and clear by the Treasury. That money was put in, and that money is helping to make sure that we can meet the independent pay review body's recommendation in terms of a pay rise for teachers. The government has prioritised a £30,000 starting salary, one of the long-term demands of the teaching unions. And I think what we now need to see is that engagement to make sure that if any strikes do go ahead, the impact of them is absolutely minimised, and that hopefully we can have talks that mean that these strikes can be called off.
Can I point out to you that yours is a government over the last 10, 12 years that you've been in office that has seen thousands upon thousands of children with special educational needs falling out of the education system entirely, and that has never been resolved. And they're falling out of the education system entirely because of unaddressed issues with the provision of special educational needs teaching. Now, I get that that's just one issue, and but it is a big issue, and it's a constantly ignored issue as well.
Oh, I certainly think it's a constantly ignored issue. It's something that, as a select committee, we do want to look into. Obviously, a year ago, the government announced a green paper looking particularly at the high needs sector, proposing a number of areas. One of the things I'm very keen to do is to hold ministers to account for how they're delivering on that, how they're working up the policy, so that those green paper consultations can be turned into real policy, which will make a difference.
It's a long time. It's 12 years into power, and it has not been happening. It has not been happening.
We've seen a huge increase over the course of this government in the funding for high needs, but I'd agree with you that there are enormous challenges in making sure
which places enormous pressures on teachers. I'm trying to paint, the reason I bring it in at all is to paint that picture of some of the additional strains that teachers say they are facing. They don't want children that they're supposed to be teaching to be unable to come to a school. They want to teach them, but if they haven't got the right provision, they haven't got the right provision.
Well, and we need to make sure that there is the right support in terms of CAMS, in terms of the services that support the identification of need, and then that the need is properly supported. I'd absolutely agree with that. And I think, as I say, the green paper that was set out last year did suggest a number of ways forward on this. As a select committee, I think we recognise that this is part of the issue. It's also the reason why, with the recent inquiry we've announced on attendance, we want to have a particular look at why children are often away from school and more likely to be away from school if they have specific needs that are not being met. So I'm entirely sympathetic to looking into these issues and seeing how the policy can be improved in these areas. But I think in the meantime, we do have to remember that we've got children who have been impacted by the pandemic. There's been a huge focus, quite rightly, on making sure that people can catch up, and this is put at risk if children are having to be out of school for any length of time. And that is why I hope we will find a way of either avoiding these strikes completely or making sure if they do go ahead, they can be done in a way that keeps as many schools as possible open.
But children's education is put at risk by teachers, by geography teachers teaching maths. Children's education is put at risk by overworked teachers. Children's education is put at risk by teachers leaving in droves, such as we've seen in the NHS as well. These are about not in every school, but these are about schools
than we've had before. I think it's important to put these figures in some sort of perspective, and we've seen an increase in the bursaries to recruit specialist teachers, particularly in areas like maths, increase, and also targeted support through the levelling up premium. Some of the areas where those teachers are needed most. So I think it is right that government actually invests in that area and targets.
Will Gillian Keegan meet the NEU?
I think that's a question for Gillian Keegan, but I certainly encourage her to. And I think I think it is important that there are discussions now between the government and the unions to take this forward. But I do think it's important to remember that when the unions came to government late last year and said the sector needs billions more in investment, that was actually delivered on. And the major ask there in terms of funding, 2 billion extra funding each year over the course of the last spending review, was something that they asked for and has now been delivered.
Thank you very much for joining me. Robin Walker, Conservative MP for Worcester and Chair of the Education Select Committee. 2 questions really. If you're a teacher, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Do you support this strike? If you're a parent, do you support this strike? It's 3:17.
This is LBC.
Welcome, Soul Traders, to your guided meditation with Intuit QuickBooks. Let us help you relieve stress with self-assessment, accounting, and MTD for VAT, all in one place. Sit back, relax, and count on us. Get QuickBooks.
Calling all young creatives. Are you interested in journalism, news, and digital content creation? Kickstart your career at Global Academy. Get the chance to work directly with journalists and content producers from LBC, with opportunities for work experience and guest lectures. You get to meet new people and learn from industry professionals to help your career progress.
Global Academy, a unique school and sixth form for students looking at the first step towards a career in media.
Join us at the LBC HQ in Leicester Square for a journalism course open event on the 24th of January 2023.
Register now at globalacademy.com.
Pay, get paid. Pay, get paid. With Barclaycard, get paid in store. Get paid online. Get paid from Switzerland. Cashflow. Pay suppliers on time, every time. Become their favourite client. Get thank you gift basket and macaroons. Get cash back on business spend. New espresso machine in staff room. Oh, paperwork. Wait, free accounting software. Search Barclaycard Payments. The payment part is just the start. Offers now available. The approval of your application depends on financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply. Free accounting software provided by FreshBooks for selected Barclaycard customers only.
Here are the words every timeshare owner will be dreading to hear. Your 2023 timeshare maintenance fees are due. If you own a timeshare, you need to consider whether it's a good investment. MyTimeshareClaim.co.uk has helped thousands of owners who were missold exit their contract and receive compensation. If you bought a timeshare after 5th of January 1999, text timeshare to 78900. That's timeshare to 78900 to find out more.
Deep breath and relax.
Forget work-life balance. What about your news-life balance? When the news becomes the noise, try The Week magazine for a calmer insight on what matters. Concisely edited from over 200 trusted global news sources, it's all you need to know about everything that matters, with your first 6 issues free. Then auto-renews for $38.99 a quarter, cancel any time. Possibly the most balanced view available, without standing on one leg. Search The Week, free.
Oh no, now what do I do?
Go left, indicators on. Go left, at the next junction. Go left, find an emergency zone. Go left, don't forget your phone. Go left, out the passenger door. If your car breaks down on the motorway, remember one thing, go left. Search Go Left, National Highways.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
If you've had experience of being taught maths by a geography teacher or geography by a Spanish teacher or Spanish by a French teacher or whatever it is, that really bothers me, I have to say. I think that is, there's a limit to what you can accept, and I think that's unacceptable. I think if in senior schools, it's all very well if it's a one-off, an emergency, somebody's fallen ill very suddenly, something like that, then fine, you're given 10 pages of volcanoes today to read or something, I don't know, fine, as a one-off. But if it happens repeatedly, without a doubt, that means your education is being affected. Strikes will mean your education is being affected. When I was doing my A-levels, there were a lot of strikes in Liverpool schools, so I know what that looks like and what it feels like and what some teachers try to do to make sure, particularly those of us facing big exams, got the tutoring that we needed one way or another. So I get that it's complicated. So I'm keen to hear from teachers, but also from parents, how you feel about this and how your child's educational recovery, I suppose, and maybe social recovery too, from COVID. Where are you up to with that? And would these strikes set it back, do you think? 0345 6060 973. Mary's call from Tottenham. Hello, Mary.
Hello. Well, you got double bubble with me because I'm a teacher and a parent.
Oh, there you go. Hit me with it. Hit me with it.
So I fully support the strikes. I think that if we don't stand up and say that the system is broken, it's running on teachers' goodwill, and we are all running on fumes, then nothing will change, and our children will not get the education that they need and deserve. It's as simple as that.
And you left primary teaching?
Yes, I did, just after lockdown, just after the last lockdown, yeah.
And how long had you been in it?
Over 12 years, 12, 13 years.
What was the tipping point for you?
It was the way that the government handled the whole lockdown thing, the expectations on the children, where the curriculum wasn't amended after lockdown. So we had children coming back into the classroom that, some of them had very well kind of managed lockdowns with very engaged parents at home that had access to laptops and were able to do the work that was set. And we had children that were sharing a phone with their older brothers and sisters that hadn't been able to access any of the curriculum. And I was standing there expecting to teach children with such a massive wide range. And that's what I'm trying to do. I can do it. But when the expectations were just as high as they were before lockdown, before the education was disrupted, it's impossible, because we were also dealing with all the social problems, all the financial problems, all the other issues.
Did you find that children were at really different stages and you all in the same classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't just the educational level, it was also their social, emotional, mental well-being as well. Because if you don't have a child that feels happy, safe and secure, then how can I teach them multiplication? How can I teach them about, I don't know, you talked about volcanoes. How can I teach them Spanish? I can't.
Yeah.
I can't, and I shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that expectation. So it really, it's so difficult. Difficult.
And difficult for you to decide to leave, was it?
Oh, it was. That's all I've ever wanted to be, as a teacher. I mean, every single teacher that you speak to will say the actual bit between 9 and 3:30 is the best bit of the day. You're in the classroom, you're with the children. The children are amazing. They can be funny. They come out with things that you just are just floored by. The way that children think around corners will always just, it's just amazing. And every day is different. It's always lots of fun, but it's the bits before 9 o'clock and the bits that, after 3:30 where you have, meetings and you know just before you go to the meeting that this meeting will be completely useless, and you know that you've got a pile of 90 books that have to be marked that will probably take you at least 3 or 4 minutes per book. So you do the maths there. So, and then you come home and you've still got to plan and prepare, and you've got assessments to do. And, you're still dealing with children that have undiagnosed SAN, or you've got, parents, kids that saw, I had one child in particular that his dad was arrested just before school, and he was told off. I didn't know this at the time. I didn't tell him off. It was deputy head, and he was told off for talking in assembly, and it just kicked off. And we found out later he saw his dad being arrested. I mean, how can a child
just stroll into school and act normally? Yeah.
And just act normally. I feel like I'm burbling a little bit. There's so much there that needs to kind of be exposed. There needs to be sunlight on the way that this country treats its teachers. We've always been a political football, but for the last 12 years it's just been worse. And we're still dealing with crumbling school buildings, we're still dealing with chronic understaffing. You mentioned STEM as well. That's, how can I teach children 29 children when I've got one that is kicking off?
But that requires, but in all likelihood kicking off because the thing that they require to get an education isn't available to them.
Isn't available. And I am not a trained kind of mental health, professional. I'm a teacher. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a policeman. I'm not a mental health work. I can't, provide these things. I can't pull these things out of my pocket.
What do you do now?
I do a mixture of supply and online tutoring.
Oh, okay. So still in the educational world, but just with less.
I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave. And the days of supply that I do, I love. I go in, I teach. It's always a joy and a pleasure. And then I can go home and leave the workload behind, and
And then go back and teach next time you go back and teach. And would you echo what Niamh Sweeney said about data collection?
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah. I know this is anecdotal, and do with it as you will. But I've worked in schools where I've input all my data, and when you are inputting data, there's 30 children and about 25 data points, and you, depending on the school that you're in, you have to be able to evidence each data point at least 3 times. So that says that the children the child is achieving that independently. So whatever it might be, depending on the curriculum of that year group. So that takes an enormous amount of time, and again, depending on how your senior leadership team wants that evidenced. You're not trusted as a professional to say, I know this child can multiply 3-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers. I know they can do that. You have to have, I've had to put stickers in books, and I've had to photocopy and put it in a file. That takes time, and that takes away from me planning effectively.
What do you mean you've had to put stickers in books? That doesn't sound too arduous. What do you mean?
Because if I have to evidence this particular data point for this particular curriculum's data point, I have to put a sticker on the page that the child demonstrated they could do that particular skill independently.
I see, and that's part of the data, the series of data. That's
part of the data that's being collected, and that completely takes away, and it does not help the children. I know the children inside out in my class. I know what they can achieve and what they don't. When I am thinking about the lessons that I'm planning, I know that Sheila can do this, Jimmy can do that, Fiona can't do this. So when I'm planning, I need to think, well, what am I going to ask Fiona? How am I going to stretch Sheila? And what's Jimmy going to be doing? Once I know that they're able to be challenged. So
do you just constantly have to prove that you're doing what you're doing? Is that what it's about?
Yes, there's no, in my experience, there's no, you're told to use your professional judgment, but you're not trusted to use that. That professional judgment
that would drive me crazy, yeah.
There's no autonomy, and there's schemes of, when I first started teaching, you had autonomy over how this is the curriculum, this is what you've got to teach, now go away and teach it. We have skeleton plans, but now I think...
But you could bring your own genius to it, or your own creativity to it.
Yes. So, I've worked with teachers that are amazing science teachers, and they would be able to give you kind of amazing experiments to do in a primary school classroom, which were amazing, as opposed to me just showing a YouTube video. I was able to do that, kind of 10 years ago, but now it's all that there's a scheme, and you have, pretty scripted. So you're almost de-skilling the profession. But going back to the data point, I've worked in schools where I've input my data, and I've, taken hours and hours and hours, and it hasn't quite followed the trajectory that the senior leadership team wanted. And I came in one Monday morning, looked at my data, and it had all been changed, because it didn't follow the trajectory that the senior leadership team
falsified.
were expecting. And I wouldn't say falsified. It was, I was told I was maybe a little bit harsh, and I needed to be a little bit more open to interpretation.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, Mary. Paints an interesting picture of her experience as a primary school teacher for 12 years. Mary in Tottenham. More of your calls after the news headlines. It's 3:31. Let's get those from Amelia Cox.
A police officer has been formally dismissed after he was revealed to be one of the UK's biggest sex offenders. PC David Carrick admitted to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, yesterday. A new law to ban all forms of conversion therapy in England and Wales will include practices aimed at transgender people. The government under Boris Johnson had previously said they would not be included in the ban. And 300 staff have been made redundant at electric car battery company British Bolt after it fell into administration. The company had plans to build a gigafactory to make the batteries in Northumberland. LBC weather, scattered showers of sleet and snow continuing for western and northern areas, drier for central and eastern parts with plenty of sunshine, a high of 5 degrees.
This is LBC.
With TalkTalk, you can speed up and spend less on broadband in 2023. Out of contract on superfast fibre? Double your speed and save on average £125 over 18 months by upgrading to TalkTalk Full Fibre 150. That's just £29.95 a month plus no setup fees. Search TalkTalk Full Fibre for deals that make sense. TalkTalk. CPI plus 3.7% increase each April, subject to local availability. To verify, see talktalk.co.uk/savings.
The Vodafone Big Winter Sale is now on. Switch to Vodafone Full Fibre Broadband from only £22 per month for 24 months. Full Fibre Broadband is up to 5 times more reliable than standard broadband. That's reliable broadband without the price tag. Just one of the amazing offers in the Vodafone Big Winter Sale. Go online or in store today. Ends 26th of January. Vodafone.
CPI plus 3.9% price increase each April. Price increase after 24 months. Credit acceptance and availability checks, terms and verification at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
During the Air France rendezvous, take advantage of great offers. Until the 25th of January, book your flight to St. Martin from £586 or Osaka from £779 from London via Paris. Return including tax. Fly with Air France, voted Western Europe's best airline for the 2nd year running by Skytrax. Elegance is a journey. Air France. To book and for terms and conditions, visit airfrance.co.uk.
Is that the tune of someone who's just discovered Kazoo? They went online to sell their car and got a guaranteed price that won't be chipped away at. That's a nice. Now they want to buy a car. They can pick it up from Kazoo or have it delivered, and every car comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee. Money-back guarantee. Can you buy or sell a car in a better way? Kazoo, yeah you can. Kazoo, yeah you can, baby.
T&Cs apply.
At a time when every penny counts, it's important to invest your money wisely. With Interactive Investor's award-winning ISA and Which recommended pension, you can choose how to invest. And our low, flat monthly fee means you keep more of what you earn. That's why over 400,000 investors already trust Interactive Investor to make their money go further. Invest for less in a world that costs more at ii.co.uk. Trading fees and terms apply. Capital at risk. Investment value can go up or down, and you could get back less than you invest.
GCSEs, A-levels.
For exam success without the stress, only one name stands out. Justin Craig. A Justin Craig Easter course kickstarts revision, consolidates knowledge, boosts confidence, and improves exam technique. With over 40 years' experience, Justin Craig has helped more than 100,000 students secure their university place. For Easter revision course details, visit justincraig.ac.uk. Justin Craig, just in time.
Serious Tissues, carbon neutral toilet roll. Planting trees instead of cutting them down. Subscribe today for 10% off and free shipping at serioustissues.com.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Teachers are to strike in England and Wales later this month and late in February and March. Schools are so underfunded, says this text from Caroline, and they aren't getting what they need. So if strikes help make the government realise how bad things are, I'm hoping that will help my children. So that's a parent in support of the strike. How do you feel about it as a parent? And I know that clearly many teachers are parents as well, but how do you feel about it as a parent that your child's teachers are striking, perhaps especially so shortly after the massive interruption to education? And I know that that's not a criticism of teachers. I know you worked incredibly hard to keep education one way or another being delivered to pupils, but it clearly was a big disruption, wasn't it, to the education process. Peter has called from Swindon. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Sheila. Hi, nice to speak to you.
You too. Where do you come at this from?
So I'm married to a teacher, and I will say I was listening to Nick this morning when the Education Secretary was on, and she gave a very distorted version of events, and it was really smart on her part, right? Like to play the strikes off as all being about money. But in reality, money is only one part of it. And I think the teacher that was just on really articulated it really well. There's a massive lack of resources. There's problems in the classroom that aren't being addressed. I mean, my wife, she's gone on strike for the first time since 2009, right? She's never gone on strike before. But the government are proclaiming, they're saying, oh, we offered teachers a 5% pay rise. But what they're not saying is that was not funded, so it had to come out of the existing school budgets. And the teacher you just had on, ex-teacher, sorry, was really passionate, and it sounded like she would probably agree with my wife. But no teacher in their right mind is going to take money out the classroom to go in their pocket, right? And the schools aren't going to be able to afford to do that. I mean, in my wife's school, they've got a situation when a teacher's off, they can't afford to get a supply teacher in, right? So they have to make do. And even if they did have the money, there's a serious lack of supply teachers available. They're having SEN children being put in a school that doesn't have the resources to deal with SEN kids. Now, it's not the child's fault, but in that situation, you've got one teacher and one teaching assistant, and the teaching assistant's being taken away to act as a one-to-one for the SEN child, quite rightly so. But then that leaves the existing teacher with, 28, 29 children to deal with on their own. Right? This is not just about money, but it's a really smart thing for the Conservative, and I'm a member of the Conservative Party, but it's a really smart thing for the Education Secretary to do, because it's a motive, right? Sheila earns $10,000 a year, I earn $20,000 a year. Why don't you earn the same amount of money as me? It's a really smart thing to do, but it's really not the truth.
And how does your wife cope with the pressures? Or your partner cope with the pressures?
She was born to be a teacher, right? Like, it's not something I could do, but she's exactly, I'm a parent as well, she's exactly the person that you could be teaching your kids. But kids. And, previous caller said about violence in the classroom. Again, this is not the child's fault, but they need to be put in an environment where there are resources and where there's support to deal with individual circumstances. And if that's going into a general public school, that's not appropriate.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Peter, for your own account of certainly how your partner experiences it. Tim in Folkestone, how do you see it?
Absolutely, Sheila. I'm an educational consultant. I was a head teacher for 18 years. I'm a director of the Conservative Friends of Education. I'd start by saying I am very, very sympathetic to the teaching profession, and I certainly believe that teachers deserve a pay rise, particularly if Mary Boosted's figures are correct, and that teachers' salaries have dropped in real terms by 24% in 10 years. But I just feel it is not appropriate to take strike action at the moment for a couple of reasons. One is, I just think, coming so soon after the massive disruption caused by COVID lockdown, and of course every time we close schools, it's the most vulnerable, it's the most disadvantaged that suffer more than anything else. So I just feel the timing of this is wrong. And secondly, of course, there is the very basic point, and that is, where is the money to come from? I mean, if the government is to pay teachers more, it can only get the money from in three ways. It raises taxes, it raises borrowing, or it takes it from other public sector workers. And I think in the current financial situation, not one of those options is acceptable.
So if the NEU does get to have talks with Gillian Keegan, how does she soothe furrowed brows and stop them asking for more pay? I can't see it happening, can you?
Well, I think there are two things to say. I think, first of all, we must make a distinction between union leadership and the teaching profession. There has always been a disconnect between the profession and its union leaders. The vast majority...
Well, it was a legal ballot, and the members of the NEU voted the way they voted, and you know that your party has made it more difficult to strike. So, there you have it.
Just to clarify that point, two unions didn't even get 50% of their membership voting.
But the biggest union did.
Yeah, they've got 53%. So, we're not talking about... We are talking about a profession that is very, very committed, that is very, very moderate, and it really does take its vocation very, very seriously. And it's with...
So do nurses, and they're striking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's with very heavy hearts that they make that decision. But to answer your question, I think, I repeat what I said at the start, I think teachers deserve to be paid as much as is practically possible. But actually, if you go around the country, as I do now as an educational consultant and trainer in fitness schools, if you talk to teachers, and I'm going to agree very much here with your previous speaker, that it isn't usually pay that comes top of the list. It may do more and more as inflation bites, but it is the view that teachers don't feel valued. It is dealing with constant change, as your previous mentioned. It is dealing with workload. It is dealing with bad behaviour.
And how long ago were you a head teacher?
I gave up 3 years ago.
Oh, okay, so fairly recent. And tell me how you view the data thing.
The data thing, how do you mean?
Well, every teacher I speak to says I'm constantly inputting data endlessly.
Well, the workload of teachers is just utterly enormous. There's no question. I mean, the use of data is one. I mean, Ofsted now seems to think data is less important than it used to, but it still remains an absolutely massive part of the teacher's workload. Not to mention the planning, the marking, the preparation. Teaching is not just standing in front of the class; it's all that goes on before that and after that. And I think.
deal experts. Sage, helping business flow.
What should I do if I can't pay my energy bill?
It's a question a lot of people are asking right now, which is why the British Gas Energy Trust is here to help. Through charity partners, we're offering extra support to customers who need it most, including free energy grants of up to £1,500. To find out how we can help you, and for more straight answers, search British Gas. British Gas, here to solve. Subject to eligibility.
If you've lost £3,000 or more in a scam or fraud, then tell CEL. CELsolicitors.co.uk specialise in confidential, no-win, no-fee fraud and scam recovery. So if you purchased a high-value item like a car but never received the goods, you could have been scammed. Don't let them get away with it. Let us help you try to get your money back. We listen, we care, we win.
CFI UK is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Hi, I'm Pep Guardiola, brand ambassador for CFI, a global online trading provider enabling easy and convenient access to the financial markets. If you are into online trading, visit cfi.trade to find out more. Since 1998, CFI, empower yourself.
67% of retail investor accounts lose money when trading CFDs with this provider. You should decide if you can take the high risk of losing your money.
These days, it's nice to know what you're getting. Like the same when you tuck into a tasty breakfast. The same yes when your kids stay and eat breakfast for free. The same knowing there are over 800 hotels. And the same every time you sink into one of our super comfy beds. Enjoy the same feeling whatever the trip. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Only available to book at premierin.com. T's and C's apply. Up to 2 kids stay and eat breakfast free with a full paying adult.
Digital confidence comes with NordVPN. Block online trackers, hide your virtual location, and protect your devices from malicious files during downloads. It's easy. Just connect and forget. Catch the special deal now at nordvpn.com. NordVPN. Cybersecurity built for every day.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Sheila Fogarty.
Let me get to your calls again on teaching and these strikes that have been announced by the NEU. John in Portsmouth, hello.
Hi, Sheila, you all right?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, you have a child with special educational needs.
Yes, I do. So basically, what the gentleman that was on that was saying about his wife, the teacher, called before last, and about the special needs kids, the classroom assistants out with the special needs kids. Now, so schools can apply for extra funding for SEN children. So my son has a full-time one-on-one. He's 8 years old. He's got ADHD and autism, and it's not ability. It's he can't keep himself safe. Doesn't understand. He runs. He bolts. And we tried to get him into special school initially, and we were told that he's too clever basically to go to special school. He'll fall behind. Because special schools are more for children with medical needs and that basically haven't got the mental capacity to learn. That is what we were told by our local authority. And yeah, it's just the schools need more funding.
What's the condition or brain type that he's living with? What is his statement about?
My son, you mean?
Yes, yeah, his education system.
So basically, my son obviously he has the ability to learn. He can learn. He's above his areas in learning, but he can't. He doesn't understand keeping himself safe and his environment safe and things like that. And and he does struggle in mainstream school, but he has days where he's fantastic, and it's a constant battle.
What kind of extra support would you say he needs that he isn't getting?
So basically, he needs the school obviously cut his day down a little bit. He goes in through one way, out the other, and not for him, but there's other children that need, they need to put money into the special needs end of it, really. Try and, more staff, because it's understanding, isn't it? It's you've got to sort of understand them, and you've got to sort of talk all nicely to them with special needs children, to try and particularly my son, to try to get it into
You've got to understand how they digest the world, really, haven't you? And then help them to do it safely and effectively.
His brain's wired differently to mine, you know.
Yes, yeah.
And he struggles with things like, he likes to cuddle people, but he doesn't understand that some children don't want to be cuddled and touched.
And that you need permission to do that to people.
You need to consent it, and it's just obviously as he goes on, he'll learn as he gets older.
Yes.
But it's just like constant trying to drum it in, and that special needs children, need to have somebody there drumming stuff.
And can you, from the pressures and strains that you've already experienced trying to keep him in education, can you see how a child with SEN needs falls out of education?
I can, yeah. So my son, he went to a different infant school to the junior school he's at now, and he's come on leaps and bounds. But at his infant school, he was left behind. He couldn't go on school trips and things like that. But at his junior school, I go on school trips with him, or his mum does, to try, so he's got a one-on-one, and so the school can concentrate on the other children, like in central London, to the Natural History Museum or whatever. So I can see how they fall out. But like his old school, he was just left sort of like on days where they'd be on trips, he'd be left in the classroom with a teacher. And if he played up a little bit, like all kids do, he'd just get put in the head teacher's office for the day. And there's no way, they need to be with everybody.
And so do you feel fear about these strikes?
I see, yes and no. I'll stick with teachers. I've got more than one child, one with SEN, but the others are, average children, I suppose, neurotypical. But I see it from both sides. Like the lower, the lower ability, the special needs children, the children from poor families are going to struggle and be put at more risk and fall further behind than those that aren't.
Yeah. So it's a concern, but you can see why teachers are feeling the.
Like my son's school, you see teachers come out at 5-6 o'clock at night with handfuls of books in their hands and going and marks. Yeah, they get their holidays off, but they're working in the holidays, and plus their money is 39 weeks worth over 12 months. That's what it is, isn't it, basically?
Well, thank you, John. And I know that if you're dealing with what you've described there, that's a lot of work as well as love, obviously, but it's a lot of work. Thank you very much indeed. Let me read this text. With reference to the sheer volume of extra work teachers have to do, they are contracted for 32.5 hours a week. Most are working close to double that. My goodness. My wife is a teacher, and we've calculated that annually she does around £25,000 in unpaid overtime. If she worked at the clock, she wouldn't be employed anymore. Teachers are paid shamefully, says this text. James has called from Tower Hamlets. Hello, James.
Hi there. I'm a secondary school teacher. I probably teach 280 different children a week. Each of them has a book. Each of them, has marking to be done, progress to be checked. I have a tutor group of 30 children whose pastoral interests and whether or not they're safe and that sort of thing is down to me. As a parent, I get my child's school report and I want to know how she's getting on at school and whether or not she's, doing well or not.
Yeah.
And I need that information. So I understand people need that information. I think data's got a point to it. It's necessary to check progress. But the biggest problem for me is we have too many children to teach. We have too many contact hours, they're called. And if they want us to be outstanding teachers with dynamic lessons, with everything marked on time and lots of data and parental feedback and all these sorts of things, then I need to teach fewer classes. And in order for me to teach fewer classes, so I can use that time to do the marking and the assessing and the planning and, and anything else that pops up, dealing with behaviour issues and that, then I need to teach fewer kids, and that means there needs to be more teachers.
So you support this? You voted to strike, did you?
I voted Conservative at the last election, but I did vote for the strike. So I'm in a interesting position where, I'm someone who, it comes from the centre right, but you know, you can't have it both ways of staff. You can't have it so you're either got to pay them really, really well for working very long hours and doing a very, very arduous job constantly, day in, day out, or we need to fix the problem, which is there's too many kids, not enough staff. We need to build more schools and hire more people.
So for you, what is the biggest strain? Is it the numbers of colleagues not being high enough? Is it the hours that you do? Could that be solved by numbers of colleagues?
It would be, yeah.
So it's
the biggest strain is that the number of classes that we have to teach, it doesn't give us enough time to do the administrative work within a reasonable working day. And so it means then that in order to get all the work done for all of the kids, you then have to work very, very silly and unreasonable overtime hours.
In order to be an effective teacher when you next go in.
In order to do what we're being told we should do. And if we don't do it, you're then told that you're inadequate. And that's not fair on anybody. If you're working in a shop and then you were told, by the way, after you finish work, I'm expecting you to do all the stock checking unpaid, you know, and if you don't do it, I'm going to say that you're inadequate and lay you off, then that's not fair, and there needs to be more staff, and somehow they've got to find the money. And as the Conservative in me is saying, well, where's the money going to come from? Because we're already taxing.
Yeah, you get the economic difficulties, but you also get the human reality that you see and experience, in fact, not just see in your daily life at work. Thank you very much, James, for your call, James in Tower Hamlets. That is it from me for today. Back at the usual time tomorrow. I always say all being well. It's a superstitious Irish lady in me. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you'll also find all of LBC shows to catch up on, as well as the best video clips from LBC and other global stations too. Download Global Player for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 6 is Andrew Marr. But now, Tom Swarbrick.
Sheila, thank you very much indeed. I hope all is well. Afternoon all, welcome to the show at 4 o'clock.
I think 16, I was working at 16. I was paying tax at 16. Could make decisions for myself at 16.
A cabinet minister suggests children as old as 16 are old enough to legally change their sex.
We will absolutely, robustly and rigorously and with a very, very, very high degree of confidence defend the legislation.
The UK government has taken the unprecedented step of initially blocking the gender recognition bill voted through in Scotland. Sturgeon calls it an assault on devolution. Keir Starmer said yesterday he believed 16 was too young to legally change sex. The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, seemed to think it was. Is 16 too young? If this change is something you've wanted, would 16 have been the right age for you?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 4 o'clock. A police officer has been officially dismissed after he admitted carrying out sex attacks on women over 2 decades. PC David Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape. The Metropolitan Police missed 9 opportunities to stop him. Home Secretary Suella Braverman says a new review will begin into police dismissals.
There is still some way to go to ensure that the force can command the trust of the people that it serves. It is vital that the Metropolitan Police and other forces double down on their efforts to root out corrupt officers. This may mean more shocking cases come to light in the short term.
Hundreds of staff at an electric car battery company have been made redundant after it fell into administration. British Volt was due to create 3,000 jobs in Northumberland as part of the Levelling Up agenda, but failed to secure funding. Nicola Sturgeon says a dispute between the Scottish and UK governments over gender reforms will end up in court. Westminster has formally moved to block the legislation which was passed in Holyrood last month. The reforms are designed to make it easier for trans people to legally change their gender, but the UK government says it could affect equality law. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has told LBC he thinks both sides are using the issue as a political football.
I sort of feel like it works in Nicola Sturgeon's interest to have a situation where the Westminster government is blocking the Scottish government, And I sort of think it works in Rishi Sunak's interest for it to be over gender identity. I do feel like this has been, we've contrived, the SNP and the Conservatives have contrived to a point where they're at loggerheads.
The government is bringing back plans to ban conversion therapy, including for transgender people. They'd previously been excluded from the proposals under Boris Johnson. The Culture Secretary says the draft bill is now intended to protect everyone. And Novak Djokovic is through to the second round of the Australian Open tennis. It's the 9th-time champion's first match at the tournament in 2 years after he was deported last year over his COVID vaccine status. Brits Andy Murray and Dan Evans are also through to the next round. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 22 points at 78.37. The pound buys $1.22 and €1.13. LBC weather, cold and frosty tonight. Heavy sleet and snow showers for Northern Ireland, Wales and Western England. A low of -3. Further wintry showers for northern and western areas. Some snow for northeast England, but largely dry and fine elsewhere. Highs of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Tom Swarbrick.
Just gone 4. Hello, afternoon, welcome to the show. Tom Swarbrick at Drive here on LBC. Hope we find you very well indeed. Coming up.
There's no other job where you can have somebody against whom a series of allegations are made of inappropriate behaviour against fellow officers and they stay in their job.
After multiple collapses in making the public safe from the police, the Metropolitan Police is reviewing more than 1,600 cases of alleged sexual offences or domestic violence involving its own officers and staff. The more they look, it seems the more they may find. We'll discuss. Also,
we just go to prison, obviously, again. Wow, have you done something to anyone else? Yeah. Well, have you done? I've murdered 4 people.
A psychopath who murdered 3 children and his pregnant partner was supervised by a probation officer who had yet to complete basic training. A report's found it's another example of a criminal justice system failing miserably to protect people. Details to come.
Call 0345 60 60 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Very good afternoon to you. In the Commons this afternoon, there have been the sounds of what an apparent full frontal attack on the Constitution sounds like. Indeed, an emergency debate is taking place as we speak in the House of Commons. Let's take a listen.
Debating. When I got to the end, my initial reaction was, well, what is the government going to do about it? Because they can't just bring an unprecedented Section 35 order to this House to then lay out reasons, but then get to the end of those reasons and decide what we're going to do about it.
MPs taking part in an emergency debate after the Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack took the unprecedented move of blocking this iteration of the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, a piece of legislation voted for entirely democratically in the Scottish Parliament that lowers the age at which someone can change their sex legally from 18 to 16. It wipes away the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and it allows that 16-year-old to legally change their sex within 3 months. The political row is whether those changes would affect the operation of the Equality Act in the rest of Great Britain, something that the Scottish Parliament does not have the power to do. The government in Westminster say the law change would affect Great Britain more widely and so have stepped in to stop the law from passing in Scotland, which is obviously a big deal. You can see why Nicola Sturgeon would be saying that Westminster and the Tories don't respect Scotland. What the government is saying is that this law could be allowed to pass, but only with a variety of changes which would, they say, give greater protection to women and girls. The other change that might have to happen is around age. Is 16 too young to be able to legally change your sex? Yesterday, Keir Starmer said he thought 16 was too young, that if Labour were to bring these kinds of changes in for the rest of the country, they would presumably start at 18. This morning, the Education Secretary, Conservative Gillian Keegan, was asked whether she thought 16 was the right age to be able to make this legal change.
We have to be very sensitive to children. We are actually going to publish some guidance and consult, because it is a very tricky area to get right, it has to be age appropriate, but children have to be supported as well. So I think do you think 16 is too young? Well, I mean, the key thing will be to have that discussion through the consultation. But what do you think? No, I don't actually. I think 16, I was working at 16. I was paying tax at 16. could make decisions for myself at 16. But, it's not really about what I think. It's how we make sure we get that right balance of supporting children, but also making sure that what they're getting taught in schools is age appropriate.
Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, speaking on Sky this morning. That is a difficult line for a Conservative Cabinet Minister to take, for two obvious reasons. One, the government did a consultation on this and have previously said that they would make it 18, so she is, I think, disagreeing with her bosses there. And two, if you are that competent at 16, if you are working and you're paying taxes and you're contributing and you're on it and with it and being adult in your behaviour, if you are legally changing your sex in certain parts of the country, you are probably competent enough to vote, I'd have thought. So what is the argument, because the Tories make the argument, against 16-year-olds being able to vote if the Education Secretary is right to say, well, I was working, I was paying tax, in Scotland it's appropriate, and possibly wider in the UK it's appropriate to legally change your sex at 16, and yet the Conservatives obviously turning their nose up at lowering the voting age. I really want to hear from you if this is a decision around changing your sex that you would like to make. You have been struggling with questions about who you are, who you want to identify as, that you want to be able to identify as a different sex. Would it have made your life easier to have been able to do that at 16? And I do know that there are a lot of parents, certainly a lot more parents, who have teenagers wrestling with this question about who they are and how they wish to identify. Would you be happy for your child to be able to make this change at 16, or wait a little longer until 18? Wait a little longer for what? It strikes me that the ability to change your legal sex after 3 months without a medical diagnosis of dysphoria is going to happen across much of the UK, certainly if Labour get in, because it seems like Starmer's only objection to this is around legal age and not with what I would say are many of the other difficulties with this kind of law change. So to preempt that, if this change is going to happen everywhere, if it's going to happen in England, Wales, Scotland and potentially Northern Ireland, should the age at which you could do this be 16 or 18? If you're going through this now, or your son or your daughter is going through this now, what do you want to happen? 0345 6060 973. 4:09, Jane Ozanne is a former government advisor on LGBT issues, director of the Ozanne Foundation and chair of the Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition. We'll come on to that bit second, Jane, if we can, because there has been some news around that today. I wonder, first of all, what you make of 16 or 18?
Well, I think we have to look at the context, Tom, because in Scotland, you can vote, as you've mentioned, at 16. You can get married at 16. You can apply for a passport at 16. You can even join the armed forces and consent to medical operations, all without your parents. So we are treating them as adults, and if you can get married and apply for a passport and you are transgender, then you will want to do that in the gender that you know yourself to be. And so this bill, in my mind, is about consistency. It's also about recognising that young people often know who they are right from the day that they're born, and that they need the state to be there to protect them from the abuses that they're currently facing, which is a lot of discrimination and, frankly, an awful lot of hate, as we're seeing. And now they've been turned into a political football. But as I say, the context is really important. If you can vote, if you can work, if you can get married, if you can have your passport, you can join the army, I think you should be able to be treated as an adult enough to get your gender recognition certificate.
I guess, Jane, we could go down the rabbit hole of arguing whether or not 16 should be the age at which you are legally considered to be adult, if you're able to do all those things, as you say, for that context in Scotland. But just coming back to what you said there about people knowing themselves, what evidence is there that people know who they are from the moment that they're born?
Well, you're right. I suppose I'm going on the evidence of many trans people I know. It's not true for everyone, that's true, and that's why we have psychotherapists and psychiatrists who are trained in this area. But I think what's really important to point out, Tom, is this isn't a one-way street. if you're trying to imply that somebody might make the mistake that they believe themselves to be trans and apply for a GRC and then perhaps 10 years later, 5 years later, who knows how later, decide actually I made a mistake. Heaven knows, some of us do every so often. They can apply very easily, in fact far more easily, to go back. So this isn't, I don't understand this argument at all. I'm afraid it comes from an ideology which is anti-trans, as indeed this whole argument about supposed safe spaces and using toilets, which has nothing to do with gender recognition certificates. And even the argument around the Equality Act, which is a completely false one. I'm not sure if people know the Scottish Gender Reform Act makes crystal clear that this has no modifications needed.
It does, but the Court of Session has a different view.
Section 15A, well, okay, they would, wouldn't they?
Well, the Court of Session doesn't have
the government.
No, the Court of Session came to a different legal view about the implications of the Scotland...
But not the Scottish Parliament.
No, the Scottish Parliament clearly had its own view because it voted through on these changes. Let me ask you about the view that the debate around this is anti-trans. Because I take that quite seriously. I'm not anti-trans. I think that trans people exist. I want trans people to have the same rights and opportunities as anybody else. But I just don't believe that there is any biological evidence of any human being ever being able to change their sex.
Well, you know what, I'm going to change the culture. I work in the Church of England most of the time, where I'm constantly told by people around me, Jane, I'm not homophobic and I'm not transphobic, I just don't believe you should get married or that you should have sex or anything. And I'm afraid to say my definition of homophobia, transphobia, is very different.
But one is a moral judgment, sorry to interrupt, one is a moral judgment and one is a biological fact.
Well, no, one is actually, the medical science on this is much more complicated, Tom, and if you really want to get into that, I presume you know that we can, I don't know if your listeners want to, but there is a huge amount of evidence now that the medical profession in particular have looked at to do with chromosomes, to do with how the brain develops. There is a huge amount of evidence, and the fact that you refuse to engage with that is...
No, I'm very happy to engage with that. But there is no evidence that any human being has ever changed biologically from being female to male or vice versa, is there?
I'm not the expert in that field, but I know plenty of trans people who are far healthier, better off, and it depends what you're defining by biological. I do believe that there are intersex people, for instance.
I agree, and that's a separate, biological category.
Your argument is one, I'm afraid, that comes from, as you've stated, a certain belief which is not founded on the science of today, which actually means that trans people, who we know suffer the greatest hate in this community, who've been told that they are a danger to women's spaces, which is absolutely ridiculous. When did you last need a birth certificate to go to the loo, Tom?
I've never. I would be absolutely appalled if someone asked to see my papers if I needed a wee.
It's absolutely and utterly ridiculous to suggest that these two things are linked. They've never been linked. And the level of, I find in the media in particular, the level of false news and stoking up fear when there is absolutely no evidence at all of trans people attacking women in these spaces is just ridiculous.
There is evidence there. I mean, as we pointed out yesterday, there was a report in one of the papers in Scotland of a male prisoner saying that he would wish to be changing his sex to be a woman and be housed in a female prison. He's a sex offender.
Well, that's a one-off case. We need to look at what the medical psychiatrists around him are saying.
What's the safeguard against that? What does the law in Scotland provide for that?
So you're going to make a whole legal policy for a whole nation based on one person in prison with mental health issues that probably need experts to look at that case.
No, I want to protect women from people like that, from the possibility of them being able to change their sex and be treated legally as a woman after having no medical diagnosis and
Tom,
3 months of living in that gender.
I'm a woman, thank you very much for wanting to protect me, but as a woman and as a lesbian woman who sometimes gets told she's a man because she has a low voice and therefore, you know, maybe thought to be trans. I'm not, but I wouldn't, you know, I've no problem either way. I know that the biggest problem we have, as you rightly say, is sex offenders. That is not about people who are trans, who are trying to just get on and live their lives with as little abuse and as little hate as they do. Most people I know who are trans wouldn't go anywhere near a female loo or changing room outside because they know that they will often get a huge amount of verbal abuse. And I think it's about time we as a society really calm down this rhetoric of supposed bogey people who are trying to attack us in our changing rooms. I really feel that we have a responsibility here to look at who really is being marginalised, and that is trans women and trans men. And your arguments do fit both categories. Trans men going into male toilets are actually horrendously vulnerable and will be more so if the gender recognition reform doesn't go through.
Good to speak to you. Jane Ozanne, former government advisor on LGBT issues, director of the Ozanne Foundation. Is 16 too young? 0345 6060 973 the number, bearing in mind that if Labour come into power, that it strikes me that the likelihood is that Keir Starmer's then government would want to do something about this, maybe follow Scotland's lead. But Keir Starmer's objection to what Scotland is doing right now is on the basis of age. He says 16 is too young, should be 18. Where do you think that line should be on age? And if this is something that you are going through yourself as a teenager, or indeed your teenage son or daughter is experiencing this, would 16 be helpful? Would that be a helpful point in their life to be able to make that change? 0345 6060 973 418.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff. On the M25 anti-clockwise, one lane is closed just after junction 13 for Staines for emergency repairs, so there are queues from junction 14 for Heathrow. The A12 northbound is closed from junction 12 for Shenfield to junction 14 for Margaretting, and that's because of ice after a watermain burst, so there are delays. On the A4 going out of town, it's taking about half an hour to go from the Hammersmith flyover to Sutton Court Road in Chiswick because of the roadworks there. In Stamford Hill, there are queues on Seven Sisters Road southbound around Amherst Park because of an accident. On the Tube, there are severe delays on the Jubilee line. London Overground have no service from Willesden Junction to Richmond and Clapham Junction. That's because of a shortage of staff. And Southern, they're running buses between Oxford and East Grinstead.
This is LBC.
This year, we're all feeling the pinch. So at Tesco, we want you to spend less with us. Which is why we have over 1,000 low everyday prices now locked in till Easter. From cupboard-filling essentials to the big brands you love. Perfect for helping you stretch your budget. Because at this time of year, every little helps. Excludes Express. Prices locked until 10th of April 2023.
Call Tom Swarbrick. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
CFI UK is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Hi, I'm Pep Guardiola, brand ambassador for CFI, a global online trading provider enabling easy and convenient access to the financial markets. If you are into online trading, visit cfi.trade to find out more. Since 1998, CFI, empower yourself.
67% of retail investor accounts lose money when trading CFDs with this provider. You should decide if you can take the high risk of losing your money.
Ooh, heard about Look Mum No Hands? The cafe / bar / bicycle workshop. They got a domain and built a website with GoDaddy to showcase their services. Ain't that right, Matt from Look Mum No Hands?
You're telling me. So now more customers can find us online.
And now their business is riding high.
Nice.
Thanks. Take the next step on your business journey with GoDaddy.
Ready to deal with your debt in 2023? An individual voluntary arrangement from Credit Fix could help. Write off up to 81% of your unsecured debt, significantly reduce monthly repayments, and have more money left over each month. With over 15,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot, Credit Fix could help you to a brighter financial future. Just text DEBT to 66777. Text DEBT to 66777 now. Terms apply. May not be suitable for all. Can affect credit rating. Free advice at moneyhelper.org.uk.
For delicious, award-winning jerky and biltong, visit RagingBullSnacks.com and enjoy 15% off your first order.
Raging Bull Snacks, made without compromise.
Maybe your stamps are on the table next to the birthday card you forgot to send. Or in that random drawer full of pens, pennies and paper clips. Or stuck to your fridge behind a to-do list and a magnet from Malaga.
Or maybe, just maybe, they're neatly placed in a completely sensible spot. After the 31st of January 2023, regular stamps without a barcode will no longer be valid. So if you know where your old ones are, this is your last chance to use them up. Or you can swap them. For more info, visit royalmail.com/barcoded stamps.
Still not got around to insuring your pet? Visit petsinnapickle.co.uk for pet insurance policies as unique as they are.
At Kia, we believe to find inspiration, you have to move. Our Kia Inspire event features exclusive offers on selected models like the Kia Exceed, Sportage, Stonic and Picanto. Get your first 2 services free, 7.9% APR representative and up to £2,500 PCP deposit contribution. Plus these models will be available sooner than you think. Search Kia Inspire event. Kia, movement that inspires. T's and C's apply. Petrol models only. Kia Finance ends 28th of February.
Tom Swarbrick, tweet at LBC.
4:22, let's come straight to your calls. Dave's in Worsop, first of all. Tom, if you're not old enough to buy a box of cigarettes at 16, I think altering your gender at that age is simply not right. One is definitely more life-changing than the other. You can... Dave, well, as Jane Ozanne suggested, if you feel like years later you've made a mistake about how you are legally represented when it comes to your sex, you can just change it back again. You know, if you decide at 16 that you are a man and you get your legal status changed to be legally recognised as